Alright guys, so let's talk about the US chip war today. Now it has been almost 2 years since Biden started the ball rolling and the effects are starting to show. Now China's tech progress has not slowed down. The DeepSeek shock is a clear example of how the West, they just got caught off guard. And remember how Biden divided the world into 3 tiers? He put Beijing in the lowest tier and basically cut them off from all advanced AI chips. But in addition to that, he also ordered US allies, the Netherlands and Japan, not to supply the Chinese market. No advanced chip-making machines to Beijing. Trump not only continued the game plan, he just ramped things up to 11. ASML, the Dutch chip giant, is now facing a further revenue collapse from the US tariff war. ASML's stock price has collapsed by an incredible 33% in a year, and their Q1 orders have missed expectations. Now, the market believed they would book almost 5 billion euros in orders, but they clocked only around 4 billion, so it's a 20% shortfall, and the story is about to get worse. ASML is in the Netherlands, and they are part of the EU, so in 90 days, their 10% tariff could get upgraded to a 20% punishment. But wait, the Trump team has another shock coming for the company.
Saying that electronics, a wide range of electronics, including smartphones, including components used to make microchips, that these are now exempt from the reciprocal tariffs. Why that move?
Remember, those products are going to be part of the semiconductor sectoral tariffs, which are coming. So all those products are going to come under semiconductors, and they're going to have a special focused type of tariff to make sure that those products get reshored. We need to have semiconductors. We need to have chips.
So semiconductor tariffs are coming and will likely be at least a 25% import tax. ASML has said they have no plans to move production to the US to dodge the tariff, but someone still has to pay for them. Now, the company also mentioned they will pass on the lion's share of the tariffs to US importers. So, US companies like Intel and TSMC plants there can be forced to eat the tariffs and crush their own revenues. No one else in the world can make lithography machines like ASML, especially in the top tier extreme ultraviolet spectrum. So, they have the pricing power. But the US still has a bargaining chip here. They could force ASML to set up shop in the US or hit the entire Eurozone with a 20% tariff across the board. So Trump still has a big card to play. And if that happens, Brussels might pressure the company to move production to the US to save Europe exports as a whole. So ASML is going to face a horrible double squeeze. Firstly, their Chinese sales have dropped from an average of 41% last year to just 27% in Q1 2025. The Chinese are buying less because Washington refuses to let the company export their most advanced lithography machines there, and that brings the most revenue and profit for the company. Meanwhile, their US revenue is also under pressure from the tariffs. Trump could pressure Brussels to force ASML to eat the tariffs and sell to the US at a discount. Now, their sales to China are compromised from US restrictions, while Trump's tariffs threaten to hit their own bottom line as well. And this seems to be the common theme when dealing with the US market. Not only can you not sell to China, you probably have to sell at a discount to US consumers if you want to stay in business. But the biggest threat comes from Chinese innovation. Now, it's a big reason why their stock price have collapsed by incredible amount. ASML is now trading below the historical average. Their price to earnings ratio has dropped from over 45 to just barely over 20, and is for a very good reason. It's just a matter of time before China catches up with the final piece of the puzzle. We have no idea how far behind China is at the moment. It could be 3 months or 3 years. But consider this one fact: China is going to lead the world in chip making investment yet again. They will spend $38 billion this year in 2025, and that's almost double that of Korean spending. And in 2024, China has sunk in over $50 billion as well. So Beijing isn't short of money. Their trade surplus is a powerful financial weapon. Their bond markets are also so flush with cash that raising money isn't difficult at all. The chip war goes beyond just money, because if it was just restricted to that, the United States could have borrowed trillions of dollars over the past decade to leapfrog the entire world, but they didn't. They simply couldn't because you still need brain power and a legion of tech professionals to really make it happen. And this is where China has the advantage. Just in 2020 alone, China leads the world in STEM graduates in both absolute amount and percentage terms. 41% of total Chinese graduates go to STEM fields, and this number equates to nearly 3.6 million STEM graduates. And let's not forget the cost of everything is much lower in China versus the US. Plus, there's now a coordinated push by the central government to bridge the chipmaker technology gap. While everyone is speculating China is 5 or maybe even 10 years behind the West, they could catch up in half the time at the rate that they're going, which is why ASML should have just sold the machines to China. Not only do you gain more revenue, you will actually slow Chinese progress down because they can simply buy the machines from you directly. It's a big reason why Nvidia ran all the way to Beijing. Why do you think Jensen Huang made his epic trip to China? Because Trump just banned the company from selling their H20 AI chip to Chinese companies. As a result, Nvidia is going to take a massive write down from this, a $5.5 billion hit to their books. And if you held Nvidia shares, you probably understand this better than me, better than anyone else. And if you are China, the US ban doesn't really shock you anymore. In fact, you are probably already planning ahead for this eventuality. You will need to create your own chips to be self-sufficient, and H20 ban just confirmed that. And boy did Huawei act fast. They just unveiled their new AI chip, the Ascend 920, just one day after Trump's ban of Nvidia's H20 exports. Now the chip is the direct competitor to Nvidia, and it's a reminder why containing China is futile in the long run. But beyond just that, the revelation of this chip just reminds everyone that the US or the West doesn't really have a monopoly on technology. China, they have the money, they have the expertise, and more importantly, they have the will to get it done with very little external help. The H20 chip was made with a Chinese supply chain that is entirely in-house. There was no need for any outside help. Huawei is working with Chinese companies like SMIC to really make it happen. Very soon, chip experts will start comparing the 920 to Nvidia's H20. And if it does stack up, it would mean China can actually create chips of up to 6 nanometers, which is groundbreaking for them. More importantly, these chips are perfect for inference usage. In other words, the chips are awesome for getting practical usage out of AI. Not exactly perfect to train language models, but to use them in our everyday lives. Now, this obviously freaked out Nvidia for Jensen Huang to fly all the way to China. He even pledged to work with Beijing for the next 30 years.
Nvidia has been in China for 30 years. The China market is very important to us. It's important to our growth. We have many employees here. The technical excellence of the Chinese industry is quite impressive, and we benefited from that for the last 30 years. And so we spoke about the last 30 years, and we spoke about the next 30 years.
What's funny is how Jensen Huang wore a suit to Beijing instead of a leather jacket. Kinda tells you how serious he was taking the trip. At the end of the day, no matter what Washington says, you can't beat the numbers. China is the world's biggest consumer of semiconductors, and we know this, it's common knowledge by now. But what China just did is another masterstroke to counter the US chip restrictions. Now, when China imposed their 125% counter tariff, they carved out an exemption. US chip makers that outsource manufacturing will not face the tariff punishment. So if you're Nvidia, as long as you manufacture your chips outside of the US, you can still sell into China tariff-free. And this is very crucial. That will counter both Biden and Trump's efforts to reshore production back home. Nvidia today manufactures their high-tech chips all the way in Taiwan through TSMC. AI chips made there can be sold into China without facing any tariff, and this exemption will shape the future of Trump's reshoring plan. TSMC in Taiwan is the biggest chip foundry in the world. They account for 62% of the entire global market, 10% for Korea and 8% for Chinese foundries. The US stands at around 7% as well. And if China refuses to buy semiconductors made in the US, this makes things crystal clear. Nvidia, Intel, and other chip companies will have to shift production out of the US to sell into the Chinese market. And it doesn't matter if production comes to mainland China or not. Even if business goes to Taiwan, it's still a net benefit for China. And other Asian companies will also benefit as China buys from them and not the US. It's the reason why Jensen scrambled all the way to Beijing. He needed clarification on how to sell to China, which means we can expect fewer orders from Nvidia to local US foundries. They will have to make it in Taiwan itself. And we have experts telling the US government what we have been saying for ages. China is building up their own chip business on the down low, and once they bridge the gap, they will use the advantage of economies of scale. Because sooner or later, Chinese chips will reach parity with the West, and when that happens, the sanctions will be torn down because they will be utterly useless. If Nvidia doesn't still maintain business relations with China, it will be game over for the company. Huawei will take over completely, they'll just dominate the Chinese market and then sell more affordable chips to Asia and then the world. Now, Huawei's technology itself is setting Jensen into a frenzy. He knows that the company can eventually catch up with Nvidia, especially with the backing of the Chinese government.
You can hold it.
What?
Yeah, it's a new one this year.
That's incredible.
Yeah, you can just figure it out.
哇，好棒啊！
真的吗？这是
真的真的，
中文小买
这个对我因为很好用，因为
因为很大。
我喜欢读书嘛。
Yeah, it's like a pen. It's very light.
And you can read this way.
Yeah.
You can read this way.
Yes.
For a movie.
Yeah, excellent. Right?
哇，那么厉害啊！
对，非常轻。
Unbelievable.
Yeah, same. Maybe it's just
这样子。
weight and yeah.
Produced by Huawei.
哇 ，Unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
差不多嘛。
应该差不多厚，我听说。
How come everybody doesn't have one? That's an amazing thought.
So the chip war itself isn't that straightforward. Just because the US slapped sanctions on China doesn't make them work 100%. Nvidia themselves know it's just a delayed tactic. It will just fuel Chinese innovation and force Huawei to accelerate even faster. And that's the big worry across US chip makers. The new restrictions are just playing into China's hands. They have a ton of engineers, they have a ton of money to throw at the problem, and sooner or later they will solve the puzzle. And the only way to stay ahead is by pure competition. Nvidia needs more revenue, and China provides that. Even Trump is trapped, he really couldn't say much about the situation.
Well, Jensen's an amazing guy. He's become a friend of mine, and I don't know, he's a person that's very proud of our country. He loves our country. I'm not worried about Jensen at all.
But let me know what you think. Will ASML survive the Trump White House? And can China survive without Nvidia chips? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.